All right, the next item on the agenda is staff and enrollment projections, and who's handling that?
I will begin with the introduction to that. Let me just scroll through and find the items here. So the first page of the report, now this is something I started a few years ago when I got here, just an analysis of our staffing, our projections, so the board can see how we're doing based on what we projected to you in the spring and on the fall with the enrollments, and then where we're at current day, and then what we're projecting for the future school year. The first report you'll see is generated by Kristen, Ms. Matana, and that is the courses under 20 without board approval. Kristen, please explain.
So as you can see, we have 4 courses that are under 20. Originally, we had more students register, but for a variety of reasons. So sometimes there is a conflict with that class that they want to take and another class only being offered at the same time. Other times, the reason and the difference between the number of students registered and enrolled is due to a change of mind a student has, whether it's in May, June, July, or August. In August, they'll typically go just directly to a study hall. Sometimes we are able to give them another course if they change their mind. Sometimes they need to take a year-long CAP course instead of a semester. So there are a variety of conflicts that arise. Those are the 4 courses
Should
that
we
we
ask
had
questions
conflicts.
now or wait till the end?
There was some questions that were
That doesn't really
submitted.
address the question, Kristen. And I'm concerned because there were significant differences between the numbers of people who signed up for these classes and took them. It's not like 1 or 2. You know, one class, 29 students signed up and only 18 took it. And another class, 22, honors French 4, 22 and 14 took it. So we need, I personally believe we need a little more of an explanation than what we always hear. Well, kids sign up and then they don't take it, because what this ended up doing is having us have nearly a full-time of one whole teacher to cover these 4 courses that the board may not approved, because if the number of students that actually did sign up, maybe we would have, maybe we wouldn't. But we know, and I remember Gary pushed it a little when we did it, is the idea that we would approve based on enrollment because we didn't have a choice. But now my concern is, are people just signing up for courses so that they meet the number and then they don't care to take them? I mean, like I said, honors French 4, what did more than a third of the students decide to take, 8 students, or not take, that they thought they would take French 4 at this time last year?
We can collect that data. It would take more time because we have to go through Skyward and identify each individual student that dropped due to a change of mind or for whatever reason. So we'd have to look to see which students were not enrolled as originally planned and then have a conversation with those students. So that's why I don't have a more specific answer for you right now.
The whole board would have to agree to do that because that takes time. But I'm just going to tell you that answer doesn't really address the question. We know kids change their mind. What we're seeing now, and it's growing, I think this is the first year we had 4 courses. And again, the same thing with pre-architecture 1 and 2, 29 signed up and 18 took it. I mean, it's close to half the number of kids that signed up. And again, maybe the board would have approved them anyway. They're 18, 19, and 14. But I have a concern that we had the arts people come to us and talk about putting the play, which we supported, and then we cut all kinds of courses. And then we found out from you and from Kevin, we didn't cut any courses. We never had enough students sign up for them. So that's why the classes weren't held. My concern is if this is going to become a practice, people can say, oh, sign up for this course, because if we get at least 20 to sign up, we can have it, and then it'll be too late to not have it once the board has enough information. So, again, I don't know if it's worthwhile doing this, but I do think it's worthwhile for somebody to figure out that we have better control on this, so that we're not holding courses that would have had a minimum. I mean, we got other courses, we got 45 kids in gym. We got the other part of the report is how some of the bread and butter courses were over, which I don't think is that great, but I don't think it's a good idea to, if we're going to see a growing number of courses where a significant number of students actually take the course and sign up, that raises a question in my mind of why that would happen.
Chris, and we could speak to is that we do follow trends. So when we are doing staffing in February, March for the proposal for the Board of Teachers to hire, we try to look at courses to where a lot of kids maybe take honors government, or take government in the summer. See, they have, so like, for example, with government, a lot of students have to sign up for government because they have to have it on their schedule because it's a graduation requirement. And then when the summer school schedule is posted, 20 or 30 of those kids will take government in the summer. So we staffed in March thinking those 30 kids. So we try to go as tight to the cap for like a class like government, knowing that our historicals have showed that 20, 30 kids will take it in the summer. But when you're staffing in March, because you got to either RIF before March 1st, you have to make your teaching decisions with the contract and with the state law. So that can put us in a pinch. I think I'm not sure what happened in pre-architecture or with the ceramics. Honors French 4 is our capstone for our French classes, correct?
No, there's
No, we have
AP
AP
French.
So, but there are some students that would be if they started here as freshmen in French
Right.
1, their capstone is senior year of French 4.
Correct.
Right.
So there's going to be some I signed up for in March and realized I barely got through 3 by May, and that's not worth sacrificing my GPA or maybe, correct?
Correct. And part of the problem is we, as like I said earlier, we started the course selection process now. So a student could be in a course and be doing well now, but really struggle second semester when things get tough.
Again, I'm like, that wouldn't surprise me if it's 1 or 2 students, but when you go from 29 to 18 on a class, there isn't another architecture class, is there? So they weren't struggling with the class to get in there. They're the
No,
same
actually,
thing-
we combined it two to make one class.
Right. So, but there wasn't some prereq that kept them from getting into it. The same thing with as Kevin said, the French 4 is either a third-year class for the most advanced French students or a fourth-year class for the next group of French students, right? I mean, it's possible some of them struggled and decided, but that was a pretty significant change. So, again, I'm challenging you a little because we know the basics. Kids change. But when you see a big change like that, I hope it's jumping up and saying, well, wait, are we handling this the right way? Or, because I hate to see it be 8 classes next year.
And I'll take that, Tim's thought process a little further. I mean, something like a pre-architect or fine art ceramics, it's more, and maybe I'm wrong here, perceived as more of elective, and so a student may register with the thought process that they're going to be loaded up on AP courses and they're going to look for maybe a course where they can free their heads a little bit, as opposed to maybe somebody who's got a history of showing applied arts and is going along an applied art course. I would assume that that person probably stays in that course if they've been demonstrating that they've been staying in the applied arts realm of the world, and they just want to do this as additional, as opposed to somebody coming through as a elective type of course.
Yeah, I think that would be more accurate with probably the pre-architecture, because it's, hey, I might be in the architecture, let me try it. Then all of a sudden I get to the end of 4th quarter and realize I need to take something else, or I might be better off with a study hall. Or
Yeah, and I don't know what you guys can do to monitor that, to see and make a projection and say we may lose 50% of these kids because 50% haven't done applied arts before and they just want to do it as an elective, and then they have a schedule conflict that says they got to do AP world history or something, and they're going to conflict out of this.
that's one thing is that something that we can pull kind of quick, just even for our notes going forward, is our conflicts. Be interesting to see. Again, the biggest one to me is the pre-architecture of almost the 50%, to see how many of that was conflicts. And Gary brings up a good point in that the kids, 30 students might have signed up for pre-architecture, but if it was at the same time as band and honor Spanish or French, then they had to choose, and they're going to choose something that a college is going to look for instead of the applied arts, correct?
Mm-hmm. So
So it'd be interesting to see how many of these were conflicted out, or if there's a way going forward we can tab that. So at least when we get a question like this, we can say, out of the 18 students or 11 students, there was 10 of them were conflicts, meaning that they had chose 2 classes that are only were scheduled at the same time. go to status of courses under 20. So the board knows, just so the public watching understands why we're focusing on the number of 20. There is a Board of Education policy we implemented to help get our controls with staffing and one of our largest expenditures under control a little bit. As an internal control, we use 20 as the magic number for courses, and courses that there's less than 20 students signed up to take need board approval in March. And so what we wanted to monitor were, those were the 4 courses that were well over the mark of 20 and didn't go to the board, and now have fallen below 20. The next part that Kristen's going to report on are the courses that we did have board approval on back in March.
So as you look at those courses, you can see there wasn't as much variation between the students registered and then the students enrolled. The biggest drop-off would be in German. And the only information I have in regards to that is that all of the AP students stayed in the course. So the students that did drop, the 6 students that did drop, whether they had a conflict or change of mind or whatever the reason was, were the German 3 students.
And the board can understand how that could be kind of a tough combination. You have your highest level German students mixed in with year 3 German students, and the teacher's trying to teach combine 2 sets of instructions and curriculums into one course. So
And actually, it's not the one right before, right? Isn't there an honors German 4 too, like there is in French, or no?
No, there's not.
It goes from 3 to 8.
Because students come in and they start at German 1, they don't start at German 2.
And then the other interesting one, Kristen, is the same with advanced autos. We combined in 1 and 2. The AP Music Theory, we brought this to the board back in the spring. We were going to go with 2 sections of choir, is that correct?
Correct.
And the music department came to us and said we'd rather go with 1 section of choir and be over the cap and offer this AP Music Theory so that students that are studying music after RB have an opportunity to have an AP Music course. So that's one of the ones where the teachers in the department, we still kept it staffed at 2, so it didn't really increase our staffing, but the teachers came to us and asked us to go a higher number in the choir and to run this course to balance the sections.
Do you have a number where you start to say, we just don't have enough to offer the class?
We try to use plus or minus 2, just like we do with the cap. So when we have courses with 20, unless it's a capstone, like a foreign language capstone, or an AP course that aligns directly to a board goal, we try to use 8 with as close to 18 as possible to even bring it to the board.
But when we're down to 9.
Right, and that's what we're saying. We brought this to the board, but either way, we were going to have 2 full-time teachers in music. So it could have been 2 full-time teachers in music, and one of those teacher schedules would have included 2 choir courses. Instead, we went with 1 choir course, and on the teacher's request, we went with the AP Music because we haven't offered it for 2 years now, and they wanted to get some students an opportunity to have the AP Music on their resume for college. So it didn't, to us, to bring that to you, it didn't say, hey, now we're going to go from 2.0 to 2.2, or that's extra dollars for 9 kids. We kind of balanced it that way.
Have we looked at where we have lower enrollment or drops in enrollment due to the fact that people are going to be in those higher levels of German or French, where we could maybe swing off of that and do a web or an online-based type of teaching with a backup with a teacher support, or you know what I mean? Have we ever looked at that, or has that ever been looked at, or?
We tried to do that a little bit with Spanish literature when that enrollment was low, and that was very difficult for the students to be able to learn that content area without having that direct teacher interaction every day. So we have explored it specifically with Spanish.
Okay.
Kristen, let's go to your next report out with classes over the caps. And I think we've done
What about CT?
C-team. I'm sorry, C-team. We wanted the board had requested data on C-team at a previous meeting because of some of the low numbers that came up in the staffing report.
So as I reported out earlier, there were 72 students that initially requested participating in C-team. And then 43 students we were able to schedule. So you can see the enrollment is off by one student, who my understanding has probably changed their mind. So of the students that we were able to schedule, almost all of them stayed enrolled.
Now, we originally had talked about, a few years ago, I think it was my first year, we were looking at these numbers because they were pretty low, and Mr. Walsh, Dr. Keene, Mr. Ruska, Mr. Gritch, and Mr. Cindy will remember us. We had a pretty large parental turnout and student turnout advocating to keep the C team.
And 2 professors, one
Right.
from U of C and one from
The zoo, I think.
the zoo,
right?
right?
And we've had some concerns over the last 2 years with our enrollment. Is that correct, Kristen, in the C team? That's causing some offset in departments because these classes are able to run much lower than our core math and science and English classes?
This year especially. And so the interest is there, I think, with the 72 students, but with the combinations and some students needing our intervention courses, with only being able to schedule 42 students, we were able to come up with some creative solutions this year. We only have 2 sections offered as opposed to 3, which has been the traditional C-team format. So we would like to continue to offer it if the enrollment, not just the interest is there, but if we can actually schedule the students and we can get the students enrolled in the class. But, ultimately, we'll be looking to see how many students we'll be able to schedule and look at the bigger picture to see whether or not C-team can run next year.
When the department chairs recently spoke at the board meeting, so to make sure we're telling the full story to those people that are watching, when the department chairs attended the board meeting, there was some concern that with class sizes, and then one of the concerns that somebody brought up, I believe, at that meeting was the C-team class sizes, correct?
Correct.
So the department chairs are aware that if we don't get, I shouldn't say that, the instructional coaches and the teachers of the C-team are aware that as long as the student interests are there and we can staff it accordingly and schedule it accordingly, you as the principal and the instructional coaches and the departments want to still run this program, correct?
Correct.
So let me understand, you said there's 72?
That initially enrolled.
That initially
or signed
enrolled.
up for it.
Initially
Son-
signed up for it.
And then,
Of those 72, we were only able to actually schedule 42 into the classes.
So Gary, there's a breakdown in Kristen, stop me if I'm wrong or jump in here. When a kid signs up for C-team, they're signing up for math, a science, and an English. And then this year we put them all in the same PE, correct?
Correct.
So when Kristen says there's bad breaks, that means a student may be honors English, regular math, regular science. So now you might have, it's not like there's clean sections of, hey, there's 25 kids for the honors science class, 25 kids for the honors English, and 25 kids for the algebra,
I don't understand.
and 25 for the regular algebra, you know what I'm saying? So they had kids we never had any kids really that were 3 across, correct? And so you guys did some strategies this year to where you said, if you want to be in C-team, you're going to have to take an honors English, correct? Or
Yes, we had 24 students that were straight across, all honors, and then the other 18 were combinations that we were able to make work. The other challenge in scheduling these students is, sometimes of the students that request C-team, you have students that need our reading intervention or need extended math, and those have to run into when the C-team runs. And so those students aren't eligible, and then we also had students that should have been placed in geometry, so they had to make a decision as to whether or not they wanted to dual enroll in algebra and geometry, or whether or not they didn't want to participate in the C-team, because our C-team program is for algebra and honors algebra.
does that help clarify for the board?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. On the mathematics and the science, then, from what you said, the classes that were 18, were they regular algebra, or were they all honors?
This year, we did, based on the student needs and the combinations that we could accommodate, they were both honors for math and both honors for science. And
Okay.
then English had 1 regular and 1
Yeah, I saw
honors.
that broken out, it just didn't,
Yeah. And that changes
sense.
every year depending on the combinations that we can accommodate. We look at how we can maximize the number of students participating in C-team.
so you've got a lot of people stretching.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, me as a board member, every year would like to see this being looked at, reviewed. Is there any way we can evolve this C-team so that it's not so locked, you know what I mean? Is there any way that we can unrestricted even more so more students can get involved with it? I don't know the answers to it, that's what we have, but I think that's one thing we need to look at, 72 to 42 tells me that, hey, is there any way that we can evolve this even more to make it happen, right? So,
The other thing,
What's your
Chris,
answer to that? 'Cause I think we need to, do you think
I
there,
I
we're at
think
a
that
point
would be
now-
a challenge because part of the C-team is to be able to do the hands-on experiences and making those real-world connections, which requires that block of time. So by unrestricting it and allowing the students that have interventions to do that, you're restricting the time available for that, which then decreases from those opportunities. The blocking is one of the things that's really important with the C-team to provide those experiences.
Kristen, the other thing that the group, when we had a room full of people, and we basically said, hey, people sign up, we're supportive of it. Having some discussion about talking to the feeder schools, to the 8th graders before they come in, is that being done each year now?
Yes, we have an event called All Around Our Bee where the elective departments and the C-team go to each feeder school and speak to every 8th grader about the C-team and encourage them to sign up.
Okay, thank you.
all right, any other questions on the C-team? Let's move ahead then.
Next category is classes over the caps, and we wanted to highlight this because, there'll be times when the board will get reports, or parents will come in and talk about class sizes, so we wanted to show you the class sizes again, for all of our core classes. The freshman year is 25 now. The cap is 25, but we go plus or minus 2. Some people will say, well, then the cap's really 27. That's true. But then there's classes that are well under 25 or 27. So a way to look at this is classes over the caps. For English 9, that would be 27. I'll let Kristen explain, but as you're explaining, make sure you talk about the cap size.
So as you can see for English, we have 2 of the 9 sections for English 9 that are 1 over the cap of 27, so they have 28 students.
Roughly how many sections of English?
For English 9, there are 9.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
For extended algebra, we have 1 of the 2 sections that are over by 1 student, so we have 28. Algebra 1, we have 6 sections of those, and we have 2 sections over by 1 student at 28. Biology, you can see we have a total of 7 sections that are over. And what we've discovered this year, first of all, we have more freshman transfer students. We didn't have necessarily more transfer students this year, but we had more freshman transfer students. So while we anticipated probably close to 50 students coming in and reserving spots for them, we had more students come in. And the reason you see science over the caps more so than math or English is that every student takes biology, whereas with English, for example, they can take regular English, honors English, but then also our special education students will take English within the special education department. And some of our freshman students, a lot of our freshman students came in with IEPs or additional needs this year. So that's why you see the science classes over more so than you do the math and the English. And then for wellness, you can see 2 of the 9 sections are over by 5 students, and 1 of the 9 sections are over by 1 student. And again, those 2 sections that have 5 students that are over, the reason is when students come in and they have specific needs and need to go into our intervention courses, those are only offered at certain times of day, so then that kind of locks them into the PE class that they have to take, which is why those 2 of the 9 sections were over. So we learned that we need to, when doing sectioning, have an extra section built in for biology, more so than we do for English and math, to accommodate for that overload this year.
Can we go back to the PE? First of all, Dr. Skinka said a couple minutes ago, we're plus or minus 2 and we'll go two over, so, well, we went 5 over on 2 PE sections. And the other thing is, while you're thinking about that.
Wait, I
there's-
think she explained it, though.
She did?
She did, she said about the special ed.
Well, I'm gonna get to that.
Yeah,
First
you
of
know
all,
what I
regardless of the reason,
Wait, it's not, Tim, you gotta be able to respect our staff better than that. It's not an excuse, they are giving you reasonings why it happened like this. And she explained in PE why they were 5 over, given due to the fact to our special ed population, and the courses they need to take is part of it. So it's not an excuse.
thanks for the enhancement. Now
You know
I'll
what I
try to
mean?
ask him, regardless of the reason, if that's a better, do we have a policy that limits how many students we can put over in a section of courses here?
There's no board policy.
Okay, but when you said we try not to go over by 2,
We just set those from
okay.
the building admin procedure-wise.
Okay, so you see what I was getting at, not excuse, maybe reason, excuse, they're synonymous, right? If I looked them up.
And,
I wasn't saying you were making an excuse, I was trying to get. The second thing is, there's 7 periods in the day, right?
yes,
And if there's 9 sections, that means at least during 2 periods, there's at least 2 sections, right? I mean, isn't there a way to shift the kids around so that there wouldn't be 5 in one section?
so how this happened was they were transfer students, and so those transfer students came in and specifically needed reading, which let's say is 3 and 4, or part of 4, and then extended math, which is 4 and 5, and then they needed a co-taught class for biology, which was another period. So it really locks them into what their PE options are when they come in, because these were students that needed very specific courses based on their academic needs. So at that point, we put students in those classes. We weren't going to
So
go and
even if there's-
change other students' schedules.
So if there's 2 periods in the day where there's 2 PE courses, they don't happen to be the ones where we have the 5 over it, or you wouldn't have done it that way.
Correct,
That's what I
yeah.
was trying to
Yeah.
make
So
sure
what-
we didn't have like one section with 40 and one section with 47 during the same period, because then you could
Oh,
move them
right,
around,
no.
right?
And
No,
so
we-
what?
We try to do that.
That's what I was trying to understand.
And so what we're trying to learn from this year is identifying those periods where we were over by 5 students to have 2 PE classes those periods next year to hopefully
Oh.
avoid the situation.
Oh, so you already planned that for
Yeah.
next, thank
It's
you.
kind of like a jigsaw puzzle.
I understand that, I'm just.
So, what gets tough is that, those two periods where there might be 2 PE classes, that also might be the same period where choir's offered, or band, something that's a AP music theory, so now a kid's gotta take that PE somewhere else, so we're jamming it over a cap.
Got it.
But there is nothing in the contract, nor is there a board policy. We've continued to try to decrease these caps while also keeping in mind the staffing and the expenditures related to staffing. So, if you look at this, I think there's roughly 13 sections that were over the cap, or 15 sections over the cap out of how many sections roughly that we offer.
I do have a question on the English.
Wow. So, I think what I'm trying to show the board and the community is that.
It's a small
when you-
number.
It's very small, and a lot of these are over by 1 student.
Right.
Sure, everybody would like to see the cap be 25 or 24, and our teachers want to get that, and eventually someday we would like to get there. It is more productive having less students sometimes, but we're doing the best we can, and we're doing the best job we can controlling expenditures for the board as well.
But what I like about what Kristen saying is, hey, next year I gotta be able to juggle this now. This PE, I gotta be able to put sections in where I think I need it, which is good, that's, you're learning and you're being able to adjust it for that.
Laura had a question.
Yeah, Laura, you had a question?
On the English section, it said 2 of them have the 28, right? So how many are in, it's a 2 of the 9 with 28 students. What is the number in the other? Because I thought we were gonna leave English in the first year kind of low.
Right, we have a cap of 25. Or when we do this, we try to divide by 25, so if 100 kids sign up, divided by 25, you would run 4 classes. So we put that plus or minus 2 in there so that in some classes, we try not to go any over 27 in any class. So when a kid transfers in, so if we start getting heavily over to 27 in all those classes, we know we need to come to the board and ask for another teacher or open another section. So being at 28, they're one over the cap of 27.
But the other 6 classes, what are we running in English 9? Because we've heard it multiple times that freshman year is the signature year of whether or not a student is going to
Right.
graduate.
So, I don't know if you have that. Do you have that?
Um,
There's gonna be some that are running well under 25, just because it's hard to balance those kids' schedules with some of the singletons, like Tim asked about the bands or the musics or the architecture class.
I have the average, and then I can look to see what specifically the
It's actually
classes
in our
are.
report, isn't it?
Yeah.
But,
Maybe I'd have to find it now, but if they were all running at 28, I would start to say,
No, they're not.
if we
No.
have 9 at 28.
I know for a
we
fact
should-
we have one freshman English class that has 17 in it.
Sounds 25.
that's, I think that's honors.
We'd almost be at the point where we could have another English class.
Right, so if you look at the next page, which is the summary, it gives you, like, for our classes that are supposed to be 25 to 1, for English, we're at an average of 23.3. For our classes that are supposed to be at 30 to 1, we're at an average of 28.16. So that shows you that there's definitely some courses that are running below the cap to help offset that average.
Well, if we're looking at our goals for the district, reading English is definitely one area that would help us achieve our goals. So
Mhm.
I would hope that it would be brought to the board if that's an area that we need support in.
Well, listen, if the board wants me to lower these caps, I have no problem, and I'm sure my principal will be getting a lot of pats on the back if we can do that. The board then has to understand that that will be an increase in expenditures, and the compliments that Tim and I just got from the auditors on how we've improved the financials over the last couple of years have come with us controlling staffing. So
Well,
we tried this year to go to 25 in all our freshman courses, which we did. So a year ago, all those reading and math for sure were at 30 to 1 freshman year. Now they're at
25.
27 to 25.
So remind me, I think one of the things that, when you came on board, was to revamp the whole scheduling system here. Because
Right.
you were finding out, like world history, they were scheduling world history maybe 3 times the same period,
Right.
even though all freshmen are required to take it, and it caused where one class
Right.
was totally loaded and another class was very,
So like you brought up with the PE of 9 sections in the past, and we're going back to my first year, but 3 or 4 years ago, that they would run those 9 sections spread over 3 or 4 periods. So
you guys are still getting data developed,
Mhm.
understanding the data that's coming in, and hopefully refining the schedule process even further. And hopefully, next year, as you say, you're gonna be trying to attempt to schedule PE in association with the special needs, and anticipating transfer students are gonna need extended reading or whatever these, and try to anticipate this further down and refine these types of things as you continue on, learning
And if you
and
look
understanding.
if you look at 15 sections, I would say we're probably well over, just at the fact that we're at 94 teachers, and roughly each of them teach 5 classes.
So the question, I think the board also has raised, is the fact that we allow C-team to have an average of, 22 between 18 and 24, and yet we allow the non-C-team average to be
Closer to 27.
20, yeah. But so,
well, and another thing, when I see, English would help us get to our goals.
Mhm.
There's certain classes that I think we should prioritize and weight more.
Mhm.
When we see a class like ceramics, we know that we have a lot of courses in the fine arts. But when you see it here by itself, you think, well, it must be the only one. I would hope that the day will come when we have to make hard choices. We just can't have it all. But if we're going to meet our goals and be on target and meet the graduation goals and meet the pass levels, then we have to focus on some of the science and mathematics and the reading.
Sure. And Kristen, before I get into that, do you have anything you want to add? I might have cut you off, so
no.
Could I ask one other question about it, Kristen?
I have an answer to
Oh, you
Laura.
want to
but
say
go
something?
ahead, Tim. I'm going to get
sorry,
into my
Kevin.
summary.
The one other question I would ask, and I think we've already talked about making hard choices, and actually we kind of loosened it based partially on your recommendation, but let's just say that you have a gym class with 45 students, or you have a English class with 28 students when your average is 25. Are you able to consider which teachers you put in them, so that, like, for instance, you're not putting a brand new English teacher in a class, maybe put a more experienced one with a larger class and a less experienced with a newer or something? Or are you able to somehow, or ones that you able to do any kind of accommodation in your staffing to help mitigate the potential issue of having larger classes?
Well, usually they're transfer students, so it depends specifically on what their needs are.
Right.
But we do look to see, specifically the makeup of the class and the teacher, if we can try to accommodate, a student going into a particular class. But most often, when it's a transfer student, we're really locked into
No, I meant-
classes that the student can take.
Let's just say, for the sake of discussion, whether you agree this is true or not. If you have a teacher, it's their first year, they're probably not as prepared as a teacher that's in their 15th year. So if we had a bigger class, 2 PE classes, and we have a 45 one and we have a 38 one, are you able to put the experienced teacher with the 45 and the new teacher with the 38 to let's try to help address that concern, or do you just, whatever happens, happens?
Well, staffing is done, so teachers are assigned to classes, and at that point, classes look pretty even. It's when the transfer students come in. So it
Right.
depends on the transfer students' needs, whether or not we're able to look at something like that, or whether or not the student has to go into that class regardless, because that's the only option and period for that student.
I'm not making myself clear. 2 English teachers, they qualified to teach any English classes. One's 30 kids, one's 24 kids. Forget whether they're transfers or not. Can you take the more experienced teacher and put them in a class with 28, and the less experienced teacher and put them in a class with 24 to help address that?
Typically, no, because both classes will start at about 24. And then with the transfer students coming in, one class based on the student's needs, the
Right, I
transfer
was
needs will
missing that.
grow to become 30.
So this isn't taking effect at the beginning of the school year? You're
Correct.
saying
The
transfers do.
classes that we're looking at are freshman classes, and these were all due to the transfers that came in.
Okay, so, but it could happen anytime up to, like, recently?
We're knock on wood, we haven't gotten a whole lot of transfers recently, but we do get transfers throughout the
Usually
entire
get them up
year.
till about Labor Day, week after Labor Day.
So most of them are here at the beginning of the class, though?
Well, for us, Labor Day is,
3 weeks in.
weeks.
Oh, okay, all right.
I'd like to direct the board's attention to page 303, and Laura, this will answer your question, I think, a little bit, and show you where we try to put our emphasis. This is our staffing summary. Last year in 13-14, we were at 89.7 teachers. Now we're at 94.2, which is an increase of 4.5. And you can see we went up a full teacher in science, almost a full teacher in social science, almost a full teacher in mathematics, and 1.4 in English. And that was specifically focused at trying to attack those freshman courses of getting them to 25-1 or 27-1, and also putting in a 0.4 of reading coaches that go from that Ms. Wysinski and Ms. Johnson are not assigned a 5th period class. That's where they work with other freshman teachers to help implement reading strategies. So we have implemented some things that directly will impact our goals. On the next page is Tim's enrollment projections. And so this is 90% of our expected enrollment of the feeder school enrollment. Tim, do you want to just answer your explain this real quick, Mr. McGinnis?
Yeah, what I do is I look at it from a historical perspective, and generally our freshman class every year is about 90% of the feeder school's 8th grade class from the prior year. So that other 10% is going to private schools. And that nets out the students transferring in. So I take the feeder school numbers, and I take that times 90% for each of the grades.
And the actual is based off of not just October 24th, 13. That's just the month of October, right? So our 2015, we were at 1585. I don't know why the date's under the actual on that lower chart in the corner.
I have one last question. It's kind of a wild idea, but Kristen, if we were to expand our summer school offerings and have some more fine arts, like some of the ceramics and some of the things in summer school, could that ease up some of the scheduling issues during the year?
It would create more opportunities for students during the year, but I don't necessarily know that would alleviate some of the scheduling concerns. Because, for example, if they choose to take another elective or another class, there could still be scheduling conflicts with that, so.
I'd like to go down, the next page was just a summary of the enrollments that were turned in by the feeder schools that Tim used to get his number. As you can, if you go back up real quick 1 second, Tim's been pretty good. In 2014, he projected 1513. In October, we had 1515. In 2015, Tim projected 1578. We're at 1585. So we've been doing a pretty good job with our enrollment projections. The summary chart that's color coded for you, it says draft, memo, draft to the Board of Education. So the little box, Mary Ann, keep going. So the public has a picture of that as well. So the box to the left, the small box to the left, it says current FTE 94.2. The staff that's listed in this little box is what I call the required FTE. These are not teachers, these are teachers with non-teaching loads. We have 5 counselors, 2 social workers, 10.2 special ed. Now, obviously, our special ed teachers have teaching loads, but they're really not figured into my class average report because their class sizes are smaller or they're part of a co-teach. Department chair release is now instructional coach, but that's 1.2 release periods. That counts for FTE. Librarians 1. ELL is our English language learners, half a teacher. Credit recovery 0.2. And as you can see this year, we added a 0.4 of literacy coaches and a 0.2 instructional technology to help us with our move towards a 1-to-1. So we have a 20.7 required FTE. And that's what fits in that first box on the right with the overall class average. So this shows you the number of kids that are taking 5 classes, 6 classes, and 7 classes. And then plus the required teachers, it says roughly we should be staffed at about 93.8. And you see that we're at 94.2, which kind of shows you that our projection and our staffing is pretty much right on, with a couple interventions of those that we added that new 0.6 of instructional technology and reading coaches. So now, moving down to 15-16, we took that 20.7, we brought it up to 22.1 in that required staffing. You see the boxes I kind of have outlined in maroon. We're looking at our special ed population is still increasing, that we're probably going to have to add a 1.0 FTE for special ed, so that would bring us up to 11.2. And I'm looking at increasing instructional technology, as next year we're going to try to make a push for all freshmen to be hopefully 1-to-1 with Chromebooks, just freshmen. So that's why I'd like to increase that by possibly another 0.4. Tim's projection for next year is a projected enrollment of 1,605 students. Historically, about 1.25% of those students are homeschooled or just credit recovery or outplaced students. So we have to be prepared to have seats in classrooms for roughly 1,585. So with that projection of just running our current 9th grade classes at 25-to-1 like we're doing right now, we're looking at an increase of about 1 FTE, 0.7, so let's say roughly 1. If we wanted to, what Kristen has asked and has recommended to us is that we at least work to start getting some of our sophomore math and English classes, at least regular classes. Or excuse me, the top one would be having the asterisk under the first one of the 94.9 is that all 9th grade courses and our 10th grade non-honors courses, correct? Regular math and regular English?
And sophomore Western Civ.
Would run at a 25-to-1. And if we went with an increase of about 2 teachers, that would make it all freshmen and all sophomore math and English classes would be running at a 25-to-1. Now, remember when I say 25 to 1, that means a cap of 27, so that there's some room if we have transfers. So we're looking right now with the current staffing caps that we use, the 27, the 32, and the 42, of roughly an increase between 1 and 2 teachers. So Laura, if the board wants me to lower those numbers, then that increase in FTE will be higher than 1 or 2 teachers. That's how this kind of works.
All right, any questions for Kevin on his analysis here, or Kristen?
Kevin, I have one question. You skipped over this page on the special ed courses, I think. On the second guide, I didn't quite understand. I understand the number of sections, but it says number of students. Is that total students or students per section?
So, it's a little complicated, so we can clean up the report for next year, but some of the, so for the life skills program, for the pre-vocational job placement experience, and then transitional programs, those 3 students are in there all day, and then the vocational one, they come in and out because they're doing job experience, but for the most part, those students are in there all day, so there's 7 sections all day. With the study skills, those are 96 students spread out over 6 periods, so there's 16 students in there each period. And then the emotional disabilities program, the 21 students are assigned throughout those 5 periods. Some students are assigned specific periods, and other students drop in and use that program as needed. So we can clarify that for next year with the report.
The one question I had then, if you go to line 9, it says geometry, is that just regular geometry?
No.
No.
Is that a special, okay, so
Right.
every class
Self-contained, right.
on there is a.
Special.
Yes.
Those
there's
are ones
more
that
of a
can't fall
discrete-
under our caps.
Okay, I just wanted to know if we had some special ed students in a geometry course with 4 students.
This
That's
is specifically
specifically
for
for-
students who came from the special education, pre-algebra, algebra, and by state law, they need a math course with geometry content.
Okay.
But these are not students that could go into a co-taught geometry course, so
Okay.
it's taught through the special education department.
And that's presumably the same with like English 9?
Correct.
Is that all special ed students? or is
Correct.
that
All of those in this chart are special education
Because we have some
students.
courses where we have special ed kids with kids that don't need special ed, right?
Correct, yeah, those
Okay.
are co-taught classes.
But those we have under our normal size
Yes.
analysis thing.
Yes, these are all courses.
These are ones where you can't, you're not mixing special ed students who have those needs with kids that don't have those needs
No.
because of
Correct.
other requirements.
Right.
Okay, that wasn't too clear.
Marion, could you go back to the page with the color-coded chart, for my projections? So, right now, Chris and I would like to say that we use the bottom chart, which would be an increase of about 2 teachers for next year, so that we can run 9th and 10th grade classes at no higher, in math and English, no higher than 27. So the board understands this year when we did our budget, this is why we do, so the public understands, and just to remind the board, we do the staffing analysis and projection analysis now for you. Next month, PMA comes in and talks about our financial picture in regards to our levy and our future budget. So this year, we ran a operating budget of roughly, 22 million, Tim?
Mhm.
And we had a surplus of roughly 45,000.
Remember the budget for 2015?
15, our current budget.
25,000.
25,000. So with an increase of 2 teachers just to handle what we're asking with our current caps, there's probably a good shot here that we're going to be running with some small deficit next year.
You're also projecting, if I read that right, 1.4 increase in the special ed, you want 1 additional, plus you want
Right.
0.4
For
of
technology.
instructional tech. So you're projecting out there 3.5, right, or 3.2.
No, because I think Chris and I have gone through and looked at some other classes that where we maybe could have internally cleaned some things up to help address those numbers. So it's only an increase of 1.8 or 2.0 over the 94.2. Yes, you're correct, Gary, in that, well, we've eaten up almost 1.4 of that 1.8 just in the required FT, but there's some sections that we think we overstaffed this year that we could maybe put closer to the 25 or 27 and pick up a section or here or there, the FT to move to a different department or a different area.
Okay, that was my concern, because you were throwing the 22.1 in there, and I was just
Right.
What, I have two
concerned that
questions.
it's not coming in as teachers.
I have two questions. I mean, I know that you can never hit it right on, but we actually were 0.4 over what we did the analysis on. So should we start next year at the 93.8? Or should we start at the 94.2? Because then we're building in a 0.4 buffer too.
I think it's you're refining your schedule
Right.
and saying you're be able to cut some teachers,
But I
but
mean,
some fat.
I think as a starting point, we should start with what the numbers say we should have been able to do it with, even though you couldn't quite work it out.
Right.
Because that's, half of the FTE. The other thing is, can you, maybe you could just repeat it. I feel like you two said different things about what you're covering with the 9th and 10th grade students under the 0.7 scenario versus the 1.8. So could one of
Okay,
you
so in the
clarify that?
0.7, this year, last year when we did this same presentation, we asked the board to help us go in all freshman math, science. Well, science really doesn't apply because they're all lab classes, which means you can't go higher than 27 to 1. So what we asked the board is to make a change last year at this time, so that for this school year, 9th grade math, 9th grade English, and Western Civ run at a 25 to 1 or 27 to 1. And that's why we saw the large increase of the 4.5 on the page 2 or 3 pages above. So what we're saying is if we keep just freshman classes and a few sophomore classes, that will get us that 0.7 increase, that roughly that 90.
What are the few 10th grade? That's what I'm.
Regular math and regular English.
Not
We would
so
run
much.
honors math and honors English at the 30 to 1.
Okay. I
If
got
we
you.
go with the 1.8, we would run all freshman courses, and then Kristen had asked if we can do all math and English at the sophomore level at the 27 to 1 or 25 to 1 cap.
But not Western Civ.
There's only roughly four sections of sophomore Western Civic kids that need a reading intervention, and freshmen have to take it sophomore year. So basically, that would get all our 9th and 10th grade classes running at 27 to 1.
That's what I wanted to clarify. We talking
Our
about
core classes. So the teachers
I'm not. I
would
just-
love to see this move a lot faster, but I'm trying to show everybody,
Yeah.
even the community, that we're moving at a snail's pace, but we are chipping away at lowering class sizes and trying to get them all under 30 and trying to get it something that's more manageable and more effective for instruction.
Well, we'll also have, we won't, when we sign, if the board approves this, we won't we sign up, but we're expecting to see some improvements in some of our scores based on what we did this year, right?
Yes, but we have to keep in mind, we usually focus on ACT scores, which are junior year.
Yeah,
So
but we
it
have
won't
other-
necessarily see a direct result when they're sophomores in terms of test scores.
All right, any other questions? Good job, Kristen and Kevin.